So, welcome everyone. It was so awesome to see all of your responses in the Mentimeter. Of course, you guys are here because you believe in the importance of mental health, and that's awesome. But of course, we're also here because we know that it's really hard to talk about. So I think that if we were to open up that activity to a lot of other people in our community, we wouldn't necessarily get the same positive answers, right? So there's a lot we have to do to break the stigma, and I really hope that today's talk can kind of help you in that. So again, my name is Michelle Garcia. I am a mental health educator and trainer, and I'm super passionate about supporting the mental health of Asian American youth and families. My personal life and career trajectories have been a super interesting journey from not buying into the importance of mental health at all to becoming an advocate. So I'm super grateful to be sharing my story with you today, and I hope that it has something for you to learn from. So, so to start off my mental health journey, I have to talk about the values that I grew up with as a second-generation Filipino-American. So my grandparents were farmers in the Philippines that worked really hard to give their children a college education. My mom worked hard to be the first in our family to come to the United States, and I'm the first in my family to be born here. And so as many of you already know, there's a lot of pressure with being a child of immigrants, and especially the oldest daughter of immigrants, right? So, you know, this being our family narrative, I constantly heard messaging about the importance of hard work and success. I was always taught that school is the first priority, succeeding in career is a priority, earning well and giving back to take care of our family and the next generation is important. And like we already saw in our activity earlier on, it's really important to survive, right? And like many other Asian immigrants, our family narrative was based on hardship, self-sacrifice, and hard work for a better life. We know that life is hard and we just lived with it. And that narrative and messaging shaped my values for hard work, resilience, uplifting our family and the next generation, which has been incredibly positive in shaping who I am and the values that I hold to this day. But at the same time, there's no denying that that kind of messaging about success and about mental health, or lack thereof, has also had some really serious unintended consequences too. So because I prioritized school so much, I didn't spend a lot of times with friends, and I felt guilty if I had too much fun. I adopted survival mentality from people around me, even when I wasn't necessarily at a point where I needed to have that kind of thinking. I always worried about if the choices that I was making were the right ones to lead me to a bright, successful future, or disappointment from family and possibly even poverty. And because I always prioritized taking care of others, I perceived self-care to be selfish. And I learned self-sacrifice, you know, and not showing my emotions in public so that I'm not burdening others. I need to uphold our reputation. So I started to learn that there's kind of this strength in silence, and I would kind of bear my pain as burdens only for myself and not to be shown to others. And of course, in many Asian and, you know, Filipino culture, comparison culture is pretty big too. So I always felt like I needed to, that I always lived in the shadow of other Filipinos that were so much smarter and so much more successful than me. And I always needed to do better. And because those other Filipinos were only talking about their own achievements, I felt like I was a bad Filipino because I had so many imperfections and made so many mistakes that I didn't hear other people talking about, being honest about. And I felt like, therefore, there was something wrong with me if other people weren't going through it. So, of course, being a child of immigrants, there's also kind of like this unspoken pressure to succeed. You know, so all the hard work, all the sacrifices made by our family before us will have been worth it through us. And that's a lot of pressure. And of course, while this messaging can be incredibly positive, you know, if the messaging we grow up with, it shapes everything about how we think, how we feel, how we make decisions. And of course, that can lead to a lot of stress, a lot of pressure that can shape your life. So here's how things played out for me. So in college, I seemingly was doing pretty well. I did go against the grain as a Filipino. I did not become a doctor or a nurse. And so I got additional pushback from family. And therefore, I felt like I needed to do work twice as hard at whatever it was that I chose to do. So I did go into a career in global development and human rights, and it was exciting. It was my passion. I was good at it. I was kicking butt in school. And I took on lots of awesome internships, student leadership opportunities. Like I was president of a club, founded a mentorship program, interned abroad. I worked so hard that I graduated with nearly 4 years of relevant work experience. And because of that, I was able to get my dream job before I even graduated. I was able to work in human rights. I got to travel all over the world for work. And this is what my social media looked like. These were the photos that my family showed off to others. So I was kicking butt, at least on the surface. So throughout college, I was noticing some small signs that things weren't right. The need to achieve was constantly on my mind. I was always anxious about if I was making the right decisions to make that expected upward trajectory in life. And even when I was seemingly doing really great, getting internships, jobs, grad school acceptances, there was always this underlying dependency to those fleeting moments of success. I loved those kicks, those highs that you get when you get good news, as anyone would, but my sense of self-worth was totally dependent on those moments. So to make sure that I kept winning and moving forward in that upward trajectory, I kept doing things at the expense of my personal well-being. So in group work, I always took on most of it myself because I wanted to show that I was the hardest worker. I pulled all-nighters to finish over-the-top projects. I put in extra hours at the office even when I didn't need to. And I kept on putting school and work at the front of my life, even before family, friends, and my own personal health. And to some degree, this behavior was actually reinforced and praised by my colleagues and my family. They praised me for being so disciplined, hardworking, self-sacrificing, because that was what we valued. Working more than others, even competing with others was expected. Success was expected. So I didn't really open up to anyone about what I was feeling outside those small moments of achievement. And the few times that I did, I was reassured with a, "You're fine, life is hard, you've just got to deal with it." Or my personal favorite, "That's not so bad, I had it much harder when I was your age." And oftentimes those remarks are well-intentioned. But what I found was that they just weren't giving me the genuine connection, lifeline, support that I needed to kind of get out of this slump that I was feeling myself start to fall into. So I dismissed what I was feeling. Life is hard and I just need to deal with it. And I pushed forward without really knowing how to do that in a healthy way. So at this point, pushing forward for me looked like continuing at my job in a toxic workplace, enrolling in graduate school on top of that. And I just kept working at my job surrounded by toxic people thinking, you know what, this is just what work life is like. It sucks. That's what responsible adults do. And I just have to deal with it. I enrolled in graduate school because it was expected for me to achieve that level of education. And the people around me were just asking me when I was going to do it because it was just expected. And in terms of balancing both at the same time, I just thought, well, I know so many other people that worked full-time and studied full-time. And if they can do it, why can't I? Comparison culture again, right? So I never once considered scaling back because to me, that would mean that I had failed. I never thought about work-life balance, self-care, my own mental capacity, because it wasn't in my language. It wasn't in my values. I never learned about it. And it just wasn't in that daily messaging that I was constantly absorbing. So pushing forward, ignoring the signs, of course, things got worse. So my habits of perfectionism and comparing myself to others, it developed this really negative self-talk and it just wouldn't stop. So I was constantly anticipating something to go wrong, worrying I wasn't making the right life choices, ruminating over something already done that I thought I could have done better. And with all those anxious thoughts, surprise, surprise, I couldn't focus in school or in work. So I would sit down in front of my laptop or textbook for hours, unable to focus on the task at hand. All I could think about was how I was going to do a bad job. I started to feel all of that stress in my body too. So when I walk into the office, I would feel my chest tighten. I would feel my stomach getting nauseous. When I was in class, my hands would shake. And because I couldn't turn off those worrying thoughts at the end of every day, I couldn't sleep. Some days I overslept. And in the mornings, it was really hard to get out of bed because I was already waking up feeling completely exhausted and overwhelmed. And even when I tried to give myself a break and spend time with friends, I couldn't enjoy myself. I didn't know how to relax and turn off all of that stress, that pain that I was feeling. So eventually, it culminated to a point of crisis. I experienced a traumatic event at work that was completely out of my control, and it totally derailed my academic and career plans. And I realized that without school and career, I didn't have much else. I realized that I had put absolutely everything into my professional life, and I missed out on so much growth in my personal life. So as I was living through this crisis, I wasn't really well equipped with the resiliency and coping strategies to take care of myself. And because I wasn't really prioritizing building healthy relationships, I just didn't have a strong support system around me either. So fortunately, at the time, I happened to be doing a mandatory mental health field placement for my graduate school. And it turned out to be the best place I ever worked at, and blessing in disguise. All of my coworkers were incredibly caring and practiced what they preached, and what we were teaching was mental health education in schools. We were rolling out the first ever statewide mandate to teach mental health education in every single K through 12 school in the state. This was in New York, just in 2018, believe it or not. And at this assignment, I started to slowly learn this very positive, action-oriented mental health messaging that I kind of should have learned when I was young. So I learned that mental health is real and valid, which is a no-brainer, right? But how much do we really believe that? You know, growing up with messaging that's super common in Asian communities that, you know, mental illness isn't real. That's just what people who don't know how to deal with their problems call it. Mental health challenges are a sign of personal weakness. Mental illness is a white people problem. Of course, all of those things are not true. I learned that mental health challenges, yes, are a normal part of the human experience, but they are still very important to address. So yeah, everyone experiences pain and hardship, but when we don't acknowledge those pains, self-care, get support, heal, and grow from it, those unresolved mental health challenges can grow to become illness and become incredibly debilitating in life. I also learned that mental health isn't an either or, it exists on a spectrum. So there's wellness, there's illness, and there is every point in between. So just the same way that it is like that for our physical health, our mental health isn't stagnant. We're not 100% mentally healthy or 100% mentally ill for the entirety of our lives. And because our mental health is dynamic, we can always take control of our mental health to take action to move closer to wellness side of the spectrum. And I also learned that the earlier that we take action, the better results that we have. So the earlier you start to self-care, get support from others, practice the language of positive mental health, the healthier you'll be. And so even if you're not at a point of crisis, like you're functioning pretty well, but you're starting to notice some signs that your stresses are getting overwhelming, preventing you from doing the things that you want to, you can be proactive now to prevent those stresses from growing and negatively impacting your life. Or even if you're at that really, really rough point of burnout or crisis, you can still take steps to move yourself towards wellness. Find people around you that are willing to support you along the way. So how did I take personal responsibility and move towards wellness? Well, I started building my wellness plan and toolkit, AKA my action plan and arsenal of resources that I turn to when I need a little or a big mental health boost. So first off, I practiced self-awareness. I needed to take some time to really reflect and figure out, you know, what are the signs that I'm not okay? What's going on in my thoughts, my body, my behaviors that show me something is not right here. And then I needed to be self-aware in what actions and strategies can work that will help me feel good again. So as I figured that out, then I started to self-care. For me, those physical symptoms of anxiety and depression were really debilitating. So I started to practice physical anxiety relief techniques. So things like progressive muscle relaxation to untense my body, square breathing to stabilize my breath, hitting the gym, doing some cardio to get all those positive mental health benefits. those are really important too, so don't skip out. I learned how to retrain my thoughts and self-talk. That's a huge one. With a lot of practice, I learned how to catch those worrying, criticizing, catastrophizing thoughts and turn them into confident, encouraging, kind self-talk. I learned to be self-compassionate the same way that I would be kind to, support, hype up my friends, tell them that they deserve all the best and to enjoy life. I learned to do that for myself. And I learned to give myself more credit and celebrate everyday victories. So at my core, I am still a very type A, achievement-oriented individual, but I'm learning how to challenge that into more positive, healthy ways. So at the end of every day, I write down my successes, but unlike before, I'm thinking holistically. So my wins for one day may include things like shooting an important email, but it also includes things as simple as eating breakfast, having a Zoom date with my girlfriends, sleeping in on a Saturday, because those are things that are important to keep myself mentally healthy too. And I surround myself with good supporters. So speaking of supporters, I know many of you are already thinking, this is great, but you know what? I just don't think that I can get my parents, my siblings, or so-and-so on board. They're just not gonna understand it. And I get that, I totally do. Being American born, I personally think that, these mental health concepts that I was learning about and it's now being taught at schools, I felt like I could kind of connect with it. But if I tried to bring it home to my immigrant Filipino parents, they're not gonna be on board. So I started to think, how can we put this into the language of our immigrant families, our Asian American families? And so I figured we're gonna have to frame it in a way that aligns with our culture and our shared values. We've got to speak the same language, literally and figuratively. So I took a look at my culture and family and I thought, how can they be a source of strength and resilience for me? So remember that wellness toolbox that I talked about earlier? So some of those practices may sound super, super Western and American and your family won't be on board, but think about what they've gifted you. What's in your family, what's in your culture that is supportive of your mental health? So draw on anything from cultural beliefs, attitudes, traditions, practices, whatever works for you. So just as an example, for me, one of the things that I draw from my Catholic Filipino culture is the serenity prayer, which goes something along the lines of, help me to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So for me, this prayer, which is super, super common in our culture, that's something that is speaking to acceptance, personal responsibility, and self-awareness. And even though I'm not super religious, keeping this prayer close to my heart is also something that I can help stay connected to my family and get my family's buy-in to those kinds of concepts. Another example is the Filipino concept of pamana, or gifts to the next generation, as well as my own family narrative. When I think about the greatest gifts across generations in my family, my grandparents gifted my mom a college education. My mom gifted me financial stability in the United States, and I'm gifting my future children a mentally healthy household. And so that's a contribution that my family is really proud to see me modeling and making. And, talking about mental health in Asian families and communities, it's so stigmatized. Even in my own family, it's taken so much time, but slowly I see us becoming mentally healthier and learning to support each other a little bit better. So framing these tough conversations about mental health from the lens of our shared values really helps bridge that gap. It shows that we have the same values, we have the same goals, we're working to improve our mental health together, and that our Asian American values are really in support of our mental health. We just need to express it in healthier ways. So I'll wrap up. But there's a lot to talk about mental health, but I hope that if there's anything that you get from this talk, it's to pursue your growth holistically in both your personal and your professional life. Know that no matter where you're at in your journey, you can always take steps to control your mental health through self-awareness, self-care, self-advocacy. I hope you feel a little less alone. Everyone's going through it. And, you got to connect with your supporters and be prepared to support your loved ones too. And even if you're at that point where, you're still really focused on career, academics, as you're expected to, and that's what your family expects from you too, know that mental wellness is the foundation for success. It can be a vehicle for success, because when you're at your best mentally, that's when you can succeed in absolutely everything that you want to. And lastly, don't forget that, of course, you recognize that you have power to model mentally healthy behaviors in your community. You can set an example to break the stigma, break the cycle, and have a positive mental health impact in your family, your culture, your community. And so thank you guys very much. I'll pass it off to Portia for the rest of our activities.